Now we can reach right in, take out that audio, and use it anywhere we want. Well, the big news today is that Logic 10.5 is out. We were kind of expecting this with the leaked photo for a few weeks ago. A lot of people thought maybe that was fake, but obviously it's not. We have all these new features inside Logic. A lot of them coming from GarageBand or MainStage. Very few things actually coming brand new, which is really interesting. So we're going to be looking at a few of these, but today, right now, all I want to do is talk about how Logic is now the ultimate sample workstation. From sampling to auto sampling to all kinds of really cool things we can do. This is now a beast when it comes to sampling. So let's take a look at the features which really pertain just to sampling. If you're watching the videos for the first time, also don't forget to hit subscribe, hit that notification bell, because we're going to be doing a ton of new videos over the next couple weeks, looking more in depth at 10.5. Okay, let's jump right into the software. Okay, so what we're going to do is look at the sampling features now inside the new Logic 10.5. This is probably the biggest strength. Now, a lot of people are going to be wanting to know about the live loops, and I'm not going to ever really focus on those because that's not the way I work, and I'm not going to just cater my videos to the flashy new features that are out there because I'm not really interested as much. So go to some of the other channels if you want to learn more about the live loops. I'm going to focus on the things that I'm using every day in my workflow and have been looking forward to. So one of the main things that I've been hoping for is that sampling, the auto sampler would come. This is the instrument or the feature that originally came from Redmatica when they bought it, the Italian company. A number of years ago, it went into MainStage and now we have it in Logic. So here's an example workflow of something I'm going to be doing a lot of. This is an external instrument. I've got this right now patched. Let me see if I can pull open Audio MIDI setup. So I have my phone connected through the IDAM protocol. I can now use it as an input from the output, and it carries MIDI both directions. So I'm going to play on my MIDI controller. And that's MIDI coming from my controller into Logic, out to my phone. It's playing the KQ Dixie instrument, which is a DX7 clone. And so I've got all the DX7 stuff there. And it has the basic DX7 ROM loaded up from the actual DX7 itself. This is the Electronic Piano 1, which is an iconic electronic piano sound. Just sounds great. Now, I can always have this attached if I want. I can leave my phone attached every time I play, but that's not always practical for a lot of reasons. One is if I'm on my laptop, I hook up my phone, it's going to suck the battery of both devices, essentially. And so it doesn't always make sense. So I want to actually make a sampled version of this instrument. So with the new auto sampler, come on to this. I'm going to load up Auto Sampler Stereo as an audio effect. This pops up. Now, I'm going to do a simple version just so you can see this, but you could do every single note if you wanted. You could have it sustain out. We don't need to do the aftertouch, but so we're going to do, let's do 3 velocity layers. We're going to do logarithmic a little bit. So I'm going to have a little bit more depth or density in the higher, just slightly. And we can do the whole range if we want. Let's just do the ones we have. We're going to do every 3 semitones. No round robin for this. I am going to do a loop on this with a crossfade. I think we should probably do that. And it's going to automatically figure that part out. So I've got this all set. We're going to sample it. this asks where we want to put this. E piano 1. Put it in the auto sampled folder. And now it's going to play every note and sample them at the different velocity layers for the full 10 seconds. And so you can see this is going to take a few minutes in order to get the whole instrument. But what we end up with at the very end is that instrument from my phone in Logic here. And now we're going to have so many powerful tools to work with when it comes to using samples. So I'm going to pause the video, let this finish, and then I'll show you what it looks like at the other side. Okay, the instrument just finished. So now we can close that down. And actually we can deactivate this if we want. So that instrument, the original one, is still playable. We're going to load up a second instrument now, and we're going to pull open the sampler, and we'll come through here. Let's go to the actual patches for this. So under sampler, auto samplered, this is the instrument which I just created. Nice little sustain there at the end. Let's turn on mapping just so you can see it. Turn off the other ones here. This is what was just created using the auto sampler. So now we can come through here, edit these if we want. We can come actually look at the instruments themselves. So you can see where the loop point are, and that uses the crossfade just like I asked it to. Pretty awesome. So that's not the only way we can use that, but it certainly is an amazing way to incorporate our external instruments. I've got probably a half dozen hardware instruments that I don't use as much as I used to. I started doing this because the auto sampler was available in MainStage before this, so we've had access to it. But now that it's in Logic, I think it's re-inspired me to get more of those sounds off of the external instruments that I used to use so much and bring them into Logic and start using them more. Especially since with Sampler, we have so many cool features. Now, up front, for the most part, this is really just the EXS24 with a couple additional things. For instance, if we come in here to our mapping and we look at our group page and we say view, this is pretty much what we had before in terms of all the control pieces. We had all the ability to select groups by all of these. We have the offsets, we have the envelopes, the playback options. We have the enable by articulation value. So I can have different instruments and set them by articulation. We have round robin. There's really nothing here that's completely revolutionary for the most part, except down here in our zone editor, we have some additional things which are really cool. So we have the auto loop with loop area. We have the retune functionality. That means I could come through and actually get this to be tuned if it was auto-tune originally. This is going to be very useful because I have an old Billhorn folding organ. It's a reed organ, and it's like 16 or 17 cents sharp across the whole thing. Instead of getting that actually tuned, which I don't want to spend money to have somebody then ship it, and it's just a lot of pain, I'm actually going to sample that and have this be retuned. We can reanalyze transients with tempo. We can derive tempo from loop length. So we could actually be pulling in non-musical instrument loops and have them work with this in here as well. Also, we have the new flex time option, which we can come through and use that. So instead of having a sample that as you play up on the notes, it gets shorter and higher, you can actually have it be adjusted here using the flex time. It was just a matter of time before we got that feature because flex is such a big part of Logic now. It made sense to incorporate it into any new samplers we have. So yes, this is very similar. It's incredibly similar to the EXS24 with all of the cool technology that Logic has added with all the flex time and pitch type things that are going on. So we have all of our zones just like we did before. We can do creative work with this. A lot of this is drag and drop as well, so it interacts with the rest of the interface really well. Super cool. Then we have our typical modulators that we'd expect, a couple envelopes and LFO. We have the modulation matrix, which is very similar to what we had with the EXS24. That whole section was always powerful and great. Now we can come through and add a bunch more if we want to. All of our sources, including external controllers and internal things, side chaining, all the destinations for this, including things like the articulation ID. So we could have an instrument now that with an LFO or an envelope, that changes the articulation ID for a patch. Or we could really easily just create a mod wheel fix for an articulation ID so that the mod wheel then controls that particular part of it. We have the amount here. We have the VIA, which we had in the EXS24, so we can do modulations of modulations plus inversions of that. Very powerful. Then we have our other filters, and we have our amplitude, output amplitude as well, plus a bunch of other settings to continue to get the exact right playback. This sampler is hands down one of the great samplers instantly. The only thing we're missing, as far as I can tell, would be an advanced scripting engine. Now, if only Logic had some way to incorporate scripting into its sample. Oh, wait, we have MIDI effects. So we could be using this scripter in conjunction with our sampler to do even more cool things. So we are not even limited by that. It's just not incorporated directly into the sampler itself. So this becomes, again, one of the greatest sample platforms out there among all of them. Next thing, and one of the last things we're going to look at right now, would be our quick sampler. Now I skipped this step when I went straight to the sampler, the big sampler, but we're going to look at this in a second. It's re-indexing some of our loops because I just installed the rest of them. As soon as this pops up, we will take a peek. I just want to show you how easy this is. And there's a couple parts to this that really shine when we're doing this. So we have the ability to drag stuff out into our track header area. And that becomes a really interesting way to create new tracks, new sampler tracks, etc. But let's just find something simple. Okay, so let's pull that out just onto our actual track area. So now we have this file. Let's zoom in on it, close our loops for a second. And I'm going to just beef up the visual so I can see what I'm doing. And I didn't prep up this part of it because I just wanted to show you just how easy if I find something. So let's play this. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's going to work. So I can drag this out onto the left part of our tracks. I can do Quick Sampler Original or Optimize. I can do Drum Machine Designer, so if I've got a kick or something I want to use, or into one of the Alchemy modes. For this, I want to do the Quick Sampler Optimized. And here's this file. So I did a little bit more than I wanted. Let's just cut that down. And I want to have it loop while we do this. But I'm going to crossfade just a little bit at the end so that pop goes away. Okay, now I want to actually have this loop as we do this. And we can also turn on snap as well. So when I move things around, it'll snap to a 0 crossing point. That gets rid of some of those pops and clicks as well. So piece of cake so far. Everything is simple. If we would just do this, we have that right in there. So what we want to do now is actually do a loop on this so that it can loop. And then I want to look at some of the other features with this at the same time. So I click on this. It brings up this little additional view here. We want to do a forward loop. And we can just find some spots here. Add a little crossfade on the loop. And you can hear that it's actually having a little warble. That's because the pitch is changing over time. In this mode, we can't do a lot to that. I mean, we can, but it's with how we set this up, it's not going to be changing that a lot. Now, the root key is D4 minus 18 cents. So we could actually change this if we want to. Change the key. It's going to analyze and try to make it fit when you do things automatically. Let's do a little bit of an amplitude envelope change. And we can also do some tempo things here if we want. I can slow it down. Even further. So I just picked a random file off of any file I want, and we can turn it into a full instrument. Plus we have the LFO 1, 2, and a modulation matrix. So we can come through here and create more effects on that. We have a pitch amount here, so we have key tracking. We can change the pitch overall. We have a filter that we can do things with. All of this stuff. So we go through and we can really create a really competent instrument with very little time. The next thing we can do is come through and switch this into the sampler. It's the same instrument. So we now have access to the same thing we just created and can do more stuff with it. So that means we have just huge amount of power in terms of creating an instrument really simply, but then taking in and creating something that's even more, just incredibly powerful with this. When we have this in here, we can now come through and do more with pitch correction. We can do more with layering with other sounds. There's just so much that we can do with this, and it becomes a very powerful way to work for it. And so I want to come through. It had that little pitch warble. I want to retune it. So it has a different type. There's a little amplitude warble happening right now, but the pitch warble's gone because it retuned it. So many cool things we can do with this. And then I use the auto loop to really make a nice loop. Still has that low, fine, kind of old school auto-tune piano sound a little bit to it, but sounds cool. And then if we want, we can open this in the file editor to make additional changes if we want. All that ties into it. Just so many cool things we can then do with this that we got with the original file just being pulled straight over onto this side right there. Some of these other things have been incorporated slightly into Alchemy. Alchemy is still an amazing instrument for mangling sound, but for sampling stuff, this finally has risen to the occasion, and we can do so many cool things in here with the set of 3 tools. So we have the sampler, we have the quick sampler right here, and then we have Alchemy, which also does sampling, and then we have the effect, which is the autosampler, and that allows us to really create some amazing things. So between the set of these, not to count all of the other cool things we have, which we can look at separately, the drum designer, the drum machine designer, we have all of our Apple loops and all those files. We have all of our effects instruments. All of those things tie into sampling in different ways. This is truly the ultimate sample workstation now. Better than I could argue that it's better than any of the other ones right this moment for sampling. Okay, hope you enjoyed this. A little deeper dive into sampling in the new Logic 10.5. If you made it all the way to the end, you definitely should subscribe, like this, share it, drink the Kool-Aid, and I will talk to you in the next video.